My name is Emma Carter. I was 32 years old the Christmas I finally stopped being my family's unpaid maid. From the outside, my life looked ordinary. I lived alone in a small apartment outside Columbus, Ohio. I worked during the day as a bookkeeper for a local accounting firm and spent my evenings building a catering business with my best friend, Nora. It wasn't glamorous. Most nights I fell asleep smelling like garlic and butter, but it was mine. I had built every piece of it with my own hands. My apartment was tiny. My kitchen was even smaller. Half my living room was filled with mixing bowls, serving trays, and catering supplies. I didn't mind, because for the first time in my life, I had something that belonged entirely to me. I wasn't somebody's daughter. I wasn't somebody's sister. I was simply Emma. Unfortunately, my family never saw me that way. To them, I was useful. There is a difference. My father, Richard Carter, was 64 years old and believed every woman belonged in a kitchen. He had retired 3 years earlier but still acted like the general manager of everyone's lives. He gave orders people obeyed, especially my mother. My mother, Linda, had spent 35 years taking care of other people. She cooked, she cleaned, she remembered birthdays, she bought gifts. She carried everyone. Nobody carried her. Then there was my older brother, Ryan. Ryan was 35 years old and still lived in my parents' basement. He had changed jobs so many times that I had stopped keeping count. Every financial disaster somehow became a family emergency, and every family emergency somehow became my problem. 3 years earlier, my parents almost lost their house because they couldn't pay their property taxes. I paid them. A year later, the furnace broke. I paid for that too. Then the roof started leaking into Ryan's basement bedroom. I paid for that. Altogether, I had spent over $30,000 saving a house I didn't even live in. Nobody ever called me generous. Nobody ever thanked me, because in my family, helping wasn't considered kindness. It was expected. I learned that lesson early. I was 14 when my grandmother taught me how to make pecan pie. I remember standing beside her, flour on my face, carefully rolling dough. My father walked into the kitchen, watched us for a few seconds, and smiled. "Perfect," he said. "Now Emma can handle Thanksgiving someday." I laughed. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. That year, I cooked my first Thanksgiving dinner. Ryan was 17. He played video games upstairs. Nobody asked him to help, not once. And somehow that became our family tradition. Every holiday belonged to me: Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, birthdays, graduation parties, retirement dinners. If there was food, I made it. If there was cleaning, I did it. If there were dishes, I washed them. I became so good at taking care of everyone that eventually nobody noticed I was doing it anymore. I was simply part of the house, like the stove or the refrigerator. 5 weeks before Christmas, I cooked Thanksgiving dinner for 14 people. I woke up at 6 in the morning. By noon, my feet hurt. By evening, my back was burning. Ryan arrived late. He grabbed food before everyone sat down, ate standing in the hallway, then disappeared downstairs with the last piece of pecan pie. After dinner, my father stood and raised his glass. "This is what family is all about," he announced proudly. "Our home. Our traditions. Our home, not my cooking, not my work, not 12 hours in the kitchen. Our home." I spent 2 more hours washing dishes. My mother dried plates beside me. Neither of us said much. Finally, I looked at her. "Ryan could help," she sighed. "You know how he is." Yes, I knew exactly how he was. That was the problem. And I had no idea Christmas was about to become the moment that changed everything forever. December 22nd. I was sitting at my parents' dining table, helping my mother wrap Christmas presents. The room smelled like cinnamon candles and fresh pine from the tree in the living room. It should have felt warm, comfortable. Instead, I felt tired. The kind of tired that lives in your bones. My mother was wrapping a sweater. I was tying ribbons around gift boxes. Neither of us said much. We rarely did anymore. Years of taking care of everyone else had made my mother and me experts at silence. Then the front door opened. I heard my father's voice. A second later, Ryan walked in behind him. Both of them were smiling. That should have been my first warning. My father stopped in the doorway. He crossed his arms. "Emma," I looked up. "Yeah," he grinned. "Your brother's having friends over for Christmas." I blinked. "Okay," Ryan's smile widened. "Quite a few friends." I set down the ribbon. "How many?" He shrugged casually. "About 25. I stared at him. 25 people. Maybe 30, a couple of people might bring dates. I actually laughed, because surely this was a joke. Then I realized nobody else was laughing. I looked at my father, then at my mother, then back at Ryan. "You can't be serious." Ryan shoved his hands into his pockets. "It'll be fun," my father nodded. "Family should open their home during the holidays." I stared at them. "And who's cooking?" Both of them looked at me, as if I had asked something ridiculous. My father's smile never moved. "Come on, Emma, you've done it 100 times." I looked at my mother. She was already opening the recipe drawer, already reaching for her old recipe binder. Her hands moved automatically, like muscle memory. 30 years of habit packed into one simple movement. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Nobody had asked me. Nobody had discussed it with me. They had simply decided, and then informed me. I looked at Ryan. He seemed completely relaxed, like this was the most natural thing in the world. "You invited 30 people before asking me," he shrugged. "I knew you'd handle it." I just stared at him, the confidence, the certainty. He genuinely never considered the possibility that I might say no, because I never had before. I looked at my father, then my mother, then Ryan again, and suddenly something strange happened. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no frustration, just empty. I smiled. "Sure," all three of them relaxed. "I'll handle it," Ryan grinned. "Knew you would." He disappeared downstairs. My father patted my shoulder. "That's my girl." Then he walked away. My mother smiled softly. "I'll help," I nodded, but I wasn't listening anymore. Because something had changed. I just didn't know what it was yet. Later that evening, I stayed in the guest room. I had planned to spend the night and begin cooking preparations in the morning. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. The house was quiet. Then I heard Ryan's voice. He was downstairs, talking on the phone. He laughed. "You don't have to bring anything." Silence. Then, "My sister handles all that." Another pause. He laughed again. "Trust me, she loves this stuff." I felt my hands freeze. "Loves this stuff." I sat completely still, then I heard him again. "She's basically our family chef." More laughter. A minute later, "Honestly, she's basically our maid." The word hit me like ice water. Maid. I didn't move, I didn't cry, I didn't get angry. I simply sat there. Because suddenly every holiday flashed through my mind. Thanksgivings, birthdays, Christmases, family parties, me cooking. Me cleaning, me washing dishes, me carrying groceries, me serving plates, me staying until midnight cleaning kitchens that weren't mine. A maid. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in my life, I realized he was right. I had become the unpaid help. Not because anyone forced me, because I never stopped them. I had spent years teaching everyone that I would always sacrifice myself, and they believed me. I slowly reached for my phone. I opened the calculator. Then I started typing. $14,000, the property taxes, $6,800, the furnace, $11,000, the roof, $31,800. That was just the money. Not the groceries, not the gifts, not the gas, not the thousands of hours. $31,800. I stared at the number. Then I whispered something I had never said before. "No." The word felt strange, powerful. I said it again. "No." For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The next morning, my father asked me to bring down the roasting pans from the attic. I climbed the stairs. The attic was cold. Dust covered everything. Old Christmas decorations, boxes of photographs. Ryan's high school trophies, my mother's old sewing machine. I found the roasting pans behind several boxes, and behind them I noticed something else. A small green tin, rusty around the edges. I recognized it immediately. It had belonged to my grandmother. I sat down, opened it. Inside was a notebook, small, green, worn. I slowly opened the first page, and my heart stopped. Dates. Guest counts, menus, dollar amounts. Every page was filled. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, birthdays, year after year, meal after meal. I turned pages slowly. At the bottom of every entry was a number, a cost, and then I saw the final page. Christmas 2003, 16 guests, 3 desserts, 5 side dishes, everything, and below it one sentence, 187 meals. No one ever asked how much. I couldn't breathe. I stared at those words, again, and again, and again. Then tears filled my eyes because I suddenly understood. Grandma had counted every meal. Every dollar, every sacrifice, because she knew nobody else would. I kept turning pages. Then I noticed something else. Little notes in the margins. Richard never came into the kitchen once. Deborah did everything today. Ryan and Emma ate after everyone else. She had seen everything, everything, she knew. She knew exactly what happened inside this family. She knew the women cooked. The men ate. The women carried everything. The men accepted it. 3 generations. Same kitchen, same story. And suddenly I felt something inside me break. Not painfully, quietly, like a chain snapping. I closed the notebook, held it against my chest, and whispered, "I'm done." For the first time I meant it. That afternoon I called my Aunt Ruth. She answered immediately. "Hey, sweetheart." I burst into tears. I hadn't planned to. But the second I heard her voice, everything came out. I told her everything, the 30 guests, the money, the notebook, Ryan calling me a maid, the years of cooking, the years of giving. The exhaustion, I told her all of it. She didn't interrupt. She listened. When I finally finished, she was quiet. Then she said, "Your grandmother would be proud of you." I wiped my eyes. "Why? Because you're finally seeing it." I frowned. "Seeing what?" Her voice softened. "They don't need you, Emma." I blinked. "They depend on you." I didn't understand. She continued. "Those are different things." Silence. "They depend on your labor, your money, your kindness." She paused, but they forgot something. "What?" Her answer changed my life. "They are not entitled to any of it." I closed my eyes. My grandmother's notebook sat beside me. No one ever asked how much. Suddenly, I understood. I had spent years giving. Nobody had ever asked what it cost me. Aunt Ruth spoke again. "What are you going to do?" I looked out the attic window. Snow covered everything. Then I smiled. "I'm leaving." Silence. "Then where?" "Hawaii," she laughed, a real laugh. "Oh, sweetheart. I'm serious." "I know you are," I smiled, for the first time all week. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Go," I blinked. "What? Go, leave, rest." I looked at the notebook. "But Christmas?" "No." Her voice became firm. "No more." I sat quietly. Then she said, "3 generations of women have stood in that kitchen." I looked down. "You don't have to be the 4th. Tears filled my eyes again. Because suddenly, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to explain. I was simply going to disappear. That night, while everyone watched television downstairs, I opened my laptop. I searched Columbus to Maui, a red-eye flight, leaving Christmas Eve, 5 days, window seat. I entered my card information. Then I clicked purchase. A confirmation email appeared. I stared at it and smiled, because for the first time in 32 years, Christmas belonged to me. I left my parents' house on Christmas Eve at 10:30 at night. Nobody heard me. The television was still on downstairs. My father had fallen asleep in his recliner. My mother was in the kitchen making lists. Ryan was in the basement talking to his friends about the big Christmas party. I carried one suitcase, 5 days of clothes, a paperback novel, sunscreen, and my grandmother's notebook. I paused at the front door. The kitchen light was still glowing. I looked at the room one last time. The same counter where my grandmother had rolled pie dough. The same sink where my mother had washed dishes for 30 years. The same oven where I had cooked hundreds of meals. 3 generations of women had stood in that kitchen. I was about to become the first one to walk away. I turned off the light, closed the door quietly, and left. The drive to Columbus took almost 2 hours. The roads were nearly empty. Christmas lights glowed in windows as I drove past small towns. Families were together. Children were opening presents early. People were baking cookies. Everyone seemed to be going somewhere. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't driving toward responsibility. I was driving away from it. I reached the airport just before midnight. I parked my car, checked my bag, passed through security, then found my gate. I sat beside a large window. Outside, airplanes moved slowly across the dark runway. My phone buzzed. Mom, I stared at the screen. I didn't answer. A text appeared. Don't forget the cranberry sauce tomorrow. Love you. I read it twice. Then I laughed, not because it was funny. Because somehow, even now, she was still thinking about Christmas dinner. I turned my phone off. Boarding began. I stepped onto the plane, found my seat, fastened my seatbelt. A few minutes later, the engines roared. The plane began moving. I looked out the window. Tiny lights glowed below. Somewhere down there, my family was sleeping peacefully. They had absolutely no idea what Christmas morning was about to bring, and for the first time, that wasn't my problem. I landed in Maui late the next morning. Warm air hit my face. I stopped walking. I actually stopped in the middle of the airport. It was 80 degrees. Palm trees moved in the breeze. The sky was bright blue. I took off my jacket. I could smell the ocean. I smiled. Then I laughed, a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep inside. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt that light. I checked into my hotel, walked onto the balcony, and stared at the Pacific Ocean. It looked unreal. For a long time I simply stood there. Then I whispered, I did it. I had actually done it. I was in Hawaii on Christmas, completely alone. And somehow I had never felt less lonely. Back in Ohio, Christmas morning arrived. At 7 o'clock, my mother woke up. She put on her robe, tied her hair back, and walked into the kitchen. She opened the pantry, then frowned. She opened the refrigerator, then frowned again. She walked into the garage and froze. The shelves were empty. The commercial mixer was gone. The serving trays were gone. The baking pans were gone. The catering equipment was gone. Everything was gone. She stood there for nearly a minute. Then she hurried back inside. She checked the pantry again. No turkeys, no ham, no potatoes, no cream, no butter, no vegetables, nothing, because I had canceled the grocery order. My mother grabbed her phone, called me, voicemail. She called again, voicemail. She sent a text, Emma, where are you? No response. Then she saw the envelope. It sat on the kitchen counter under the salt shaker. My handwriting, she picked it up. Opened it, read silently. Then sat down. The note said, Dad, I have cooked holiday meals for this family for 12 years. I will not cook another one. The equipment in the garage belongs to my business. I have removed it. The grocery order has been canceled. Merry Christmas. Love, Emma. My mother read it twice. Then she quietly folded the letter and slipped it into her pocket. A few minutes later, she woke my father. I didn't know exactly what happened next until months later, but according to my mother, my father sat up immediately. What do you mean she's gone? She's gone. The food, gone. The equipment, gone. Where's Emma? She's gone too. He jumped out of bed, stormed into the kitchen. Opened the refrigerator. Nothing. Opened the pantry. Nothing. Opened the garage. Empty shelves. He stood there, completely confused. Then he shouted, Ryan. A few seconds later my brother appeared. His hair was messy. He was wearing old sweatpants. He looked annoyed. What? Dad pointed at the garage. Where's your sister? Ryan frowned. What do you mean? The food is gone. What food? The Christmas food. Ryan looked confused. The equipment is gone. What equipment? Damn it, Ryan, your sister is gone. Silence. What? Dad shoved the letter toward him. Ryan read it, then read it again, then looked up. She's joking. Nobody answered. He looked around, the empty shelves, the empty kitchen. The empty refrigerator. His face slowly changed. Oh, then, oh no. Panic started immediately. Ryan called me. Voicemail again, voicemail, text, no response, again, nothing. Dad called. Voicemail, Mom called, nothing. I was sitting on a beach in Hawaii. My phone remained turned off. Back in Ohio, my family was beginning to realize something terrifying. I wasn't coming. For the first time in their lives, they actually needed me, and I wasn't there. Ryan grabbed his truck keys. I'm going to the store. He drove to the supermarket. The parking lot was packed. Christmas Eve, almost everything was gone. He searched everywhere. No turkeys, no hams, no catering trays, no bulk vegetables, no pies, nothing. He found the manager. "I need food for 30 people. The manager blinked. "Today, yes." The man actually laughed. "Son, it's Christmas Eve." Ryan stared at him. "I need turkey. We're out. Ham, out. Potatoes, almost gone." He looked desperate. "There has to be something," the manager thought, then pointed. "Deli section." An hour later, Ryan walked out carrying 8 rotisserie chickens, 4 bags of frozen mashed potatoes, 2 canned cranberry sauces, a fruit tray, 2 bakery pies, and several bags of dinner rolls, almost $400. The first time in years he had spent money on a family dinner. He returned home. Dad looked at the food. Silence. "Then that's it." Ryan looked exhausted. "It's all they had." Dad stared at the chickens. "That's not Christmas dinner," Ryan finally snapped. "Then what do you want me to do?" Silence. Then Dad said something neither of them ever forgot. "Your sister could have figured something out." The room became quiet, because even then, even now, Dad's first thought was still me. Ryan looked away and said nothing. Christmas Day, 11:30. The first guests arrived. They walked into the house smiling, then stopped. There were paper plates, plastic forks, rotisserie chicken, frozen mashed potatoes, store-bought pies. One man frowned. "I thought there was going to be a huge dinner." Ryan forced a smile. There were last-minute changes. More guests arrived, then more. The house became crowded. Everyone looked confused. Nobody said anything. Then the doorbell rang. Ryan opened it. Melanie stood there. Beside her were her parents. They stepped inside, looked around, and froze. Paper plates, plastic cups, chicken, store-bought food. Silence. Melanie blinked. "I thought your sister was cooking." Ryan swallowed. "She had an emergency." Her father looked around again. "Oh," her mother said nothing, but her expression said everything. This was not the elegant Christmas gathering Ryan had described. This looked like a failed office lunch. Ryan looked miserable, and somehow, it was only getting started. At exactly noon, the doorbell rang again. Dad opened it. Aunt Ruth stood there, gray coat, cookie tin in her hands, the same way she arrived every Christmas. She stepped inside, looked around, then slowly raised an eyebrow. She saw the paper plates, the store-bought food, the confused guests, Ryan sweating in the kitchen, Dad looking furious, and me missing. She understood everything immediately, but she said nothing. She simply smiled. "Merry Christmas." Then she sat in the living room and watched. She watched Ryan struggle to cut chicken. She watched guests whisper. She watched Melanie's parents exchange looks. She watched my father pretend everything was normal. For nearly an hour, she simply observed. Like someone waiting for the perfect moment. Because Aunt Ruth knew something nobody else knew. I was sitting on a beach in Hawaii, and eventually, someone was going to find out. And when they did, everything would change. Aunt Ruth sat quietly in the living room. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer advice. She simply watched for nearly an hour. The house was full of people, but something felt wrong. Everyone could sense it. This wasn't the warm, elegant Christmas gathering Ryan had promised. This was chaos. Paper plates sat on expensive tablecloths. Plastic forks bent while people tried to cut rotisserie chicken. Store-bought pies sat in their cardboard containers. And Ryan looked like a man trying to stop a sinking ship with a bucket. Guests smiled politely, but they were confused. I wasn't there. And apparently that mattered more than anyone had realized. Melanie stood near the fireplace with her parents. Her mother looked around the room, then quietly asked, "Where's Emma?" Ryan forced another smile. "She had an emergency." "What kind of emergency?" He swallowed. "I'm not really sure," she frowned. "You don't know?" "No." Silence. That answer sounded strange, even to him. Meanwhile, my father kept walking around the room pretending everything was fine. "Dig in, everybody." Nobody moved. Finally, one man picked up a paper plate, then another. Eventually, people started eating, but conversations remained awkward. Nobody understood what was happening. Then something unexpected happened. One of Ryan's friends looked down at his phone. A second later, he frowned, then smiled, then laughed. The woman beside him looked over. What? He turned the phone toward her. She covered her mouth. Oh my God. Another person leaned over. Then another. Within seconds, 3 people were staring at the screen. Ryan noticed. What's going on? Nobody answered. The first man looked up. Your sister's in Hawaii. Silence. Ryan blinked. What? The man turned the phone around. There I was, standing on a beach. Sunset behind me, flowers in my hair, smiling. The caption read, After 12 years of cooking every family holiday, I finally gave myself a Christmas vacation. Learning that rest is not selfish. Merry Christmas from Maui. Red silence. Absolute silence. Ryan looked like someone had unplugged his brain. What? Another phone buzzed. Someone else had seen the post. Then another. Within moments, half the room had their phones out. Because people shared it, liked it, commented, and the comments were becoming a problem. Someone asked, wait, Emma cooks every holiday, another 12 years. Another, I thought your mom hosted Christmas. Another, Emma deserves this trip. Ryan looked horrified. He turned toward my parents. Nobody knew what to say. Then Melanie looked at him. She cooks every holiday, Ryan shifted. I mean mostly. By herself? No, not exactly. But nobody was helping him, because everyone in the room knew, every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every birthday, I had been in the kitchen, and they suddenly realized something else. I wasn't in this room, because I had never been in this room. I had always been serving it. Then Aunt Ruth stood up. She took off her glasses, folded them carefully, and looked around. Oh, this is interesting. Nobody spoke. She looked at Ryan. 12 years, he looked uncomfortable. She smiled. Actually, that's not right. Everyone turned toward her. It was longer. Silence. She looked around the room. Emma cooked her first Thanksgiving dinner at 14. Someone blinked. 14, Aunt Ruth nodded. She made the pies. She looked at my father. Remember, Dad looked away. She continued. At 16, she prepared Christmas breakfast. Another pause. At 18, she cooked Easter dinner. She smiled sadly. And after that, she simply became the family cook. Nobody moved. The room had become very quiet. Aunt Ruth's voice softened. You all think Emma enjoys cooking because she's talented. She looked around. She is talented. A pause. But talent and obligation aren't the same thing. No one said anything. Then she looked directly at Ryan. When was the last time you cooked Christmas dinner? Ryan swallowed. I don't know, she nodded. Exactly. She turned toward my father. When was the last time you washed dishes after Thanksgiving? Silence. Then she looked at my mother. When was the last time Emma sat down and actually enjoyed Christmas with everyone else? My mother slowly lowered her eyes, because she couldn't answer. Nobody could, because there was no answer. Aunt Ruth took a deep breath. Then she said something that changed everything. You know what I find interesting? Everyone looked at her. Nobody ever asks how much kindness costs. The room remained silent. She continued. Nobody asks how many hours someone spends cooking. Pause. Nobody asks who buys ingredients. Another pause. Nobody asks who cleans. She looked at Ryan. They simply expect it. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I had emailed it to her before leaving. A list. She unfolded it, then looked at my father. Should we discuss money? His eyes widened. Ruth, no, she held up a hand. No, she looked around the room. Let's discuss money. People looked uncomfortable. Aunt Ruth looked down at the paper. 3 years ago, Emma paid $14,000 to save this house from unpaid property taxes. Silence. Several heads turned toward my father. She continued. 1 year later, she paid $6,800 to replace your furnace. Now people were staring. Then, last year she paid $11,000 for your roof. Nobody moved. I wasn't there. But later, people told me the room looked frozen. Ryan's face had turned white. Melanie blinked. Her mother looked shocked. Her father looked directly at my dad. No one knew what to say, because suddenly, this wasn't a story about Christmas dinner. This was something much bigger. Finally, Melanie spoke. Wait, she looked at Ryan. Emma paid for your roof, he swallowed. Yes. The furnace too, he nodded. The taxes, silence. Then, yes, she stared at him. You never mentioned any of this. I didn't think it mattered. She laughed once. Not because something was funny, because she couldn't believe what she was hearing. It didn't matter, Ryan looked trapped. Melanie folded her arms. Do you pay rent? Silence, her eyes widened. You don't. I help sometimes, she stared. Sometimes, nobody moved. She looked around the room, then looked back at him. You're 35, silence. You live in your parents' basement, silence. Your sister paid your parents' taxes, silence. She paid for this house, silence. And she cooks every holiday, silence. Then she asked the question nobody wanted to hear. What exactly do you do? Nobody answered. Because nobody had an answer. Ryan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. For perhaps the first time in his life, he couldn't explain himself. Then Melanie's father stood up. He placed his plate on the table. He looked at my father. Richard. Dad looked nervous. The older man spoke gently. I've known you 20 years, my father nodded. I thought Linda hosted these holidays. Silence. I thought Ryan helped around the house. Silence. I thought Emma came to visit. He looked around the room. I didn't realize Emma carried all of this. Nobody moved. Then he said quietly, That's a shame. Simple words, but they landed like stones. Because suddenly, my parents were seeing themselves through someone else's eyes. And what they saw wasn't flattering. Then something happened that no one expected. My mother started crying. At first quietly, then harder, my father looked shocked. Linda, she covered her face. Tears kept falling. She whispered, I never meant, then she stopped. Because she didn't know how to finish the sentence. I never meant for this to happen, for Emma to carry everything, for Emma to become invisible, for Emma to leave, maybe all of those things. Maybe none, because sometimes people don't hurt others intentionally. Sometimes, they simply accept kindness for so long that they stop seeing it. And when it's gone, they finally understand what was there. Nobody ate much after that. People slowly began leaving. Some hugged my mother. Others shook my father's hand. A few looked at Ryan with pity. Nobody looked at him with admiration anymore. Melanie didn't leave immediately. She stood in the living room, looking at him. Then finally she said, I don't think I know you. He looked shocked. What? She shook her head. I thought you were generous. Silence. I thought you were independent. Silence. I thought this family functioned together. Silence. She looked around. But apparently one woman does everything. Her eyes softened. And she's not even here. Then she picked up her coat. I think that's the most important thing I've learned today. She walked toward the door. Melanie, she stopped, turned around. And said quietly, I hope your sister enjoys Hawaii. Then she left. The front door closed. Ryan didn't move. Because somehow, the person who had disappeared from Christmas had become the center of it. And the people who had always been the center were finally alone. That evening my father sat in his chair. No television, no music, nothing, just silence. Then he looked around the empty room. Paper plates, half-eaten chicken, plastic cups, a failed Christmas. And for the first time in years, there was nobody in the kitchen cleaning up, because I wasn't there. And for the first time in my father's life, he understood something. The holiday hadn't fallen apart because dinner was ruined. It had fallen apart because the person holding everything together had finally let go. I stayed in Hawaii for 5 days. 5 quiet, beautiful days. I slept without setting an alarm. I walked on the beach every morning. I watched sunsets every evening. I ate when I was hungry. I rested when I was tired. Nobody asked me to cook. Nobody asked me to clean. Nobody asked me to solve their problems. At first, it felt strange. Then it felt wonderful. I spent hours reading on my balcony. Sometimes I sat by the ocean and simply listened to the waves. For the first time in years, my mind became quiet. I wasn't thinking about grocery lists. I wasn't planning meals. I wasn't worrying about other people. I was simply existing, and I realized something painful. I couldn't remember the last time I had allowed myself to do that. One afternoon, I opened my grandmother's notebook. I slowly turned the pages. Christmas, Easter, birthdays, anniversaries, page after page, meal after meal, sacrifice after sacrifice. Then I reached the last page again. 187 meals. No one ever asked how much. I touched the words gently. Then I whispered, I know now. Because I finally did. I knew exactly how much it had cost. It had cost her time, her energy, her dreams, pieces of herself. And if I stayed on the same path, it would eventually cost me the same things. I closed the notebook. Then I smiled. No more. The ocean stretched endlessly before me. For the first time in my life, my future looked just as open. I landed in Ohio on December 29th. The sky was gray. The air was cold. I should have felt sad. Instead, I felt peaceful. I turned my phone back on. Messages flooded the screen. 34 missed calls. 22 text messages. 8 voicemails. Most of them were from my family. I laughed softly. Then I opened the first text. Mom, please call me. Second text. Dad, we need to talk. Third. Ryan, Emma, please answer. I put the phone away. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I drove home, walked into my apartment, and unpacked. For several hours, I did absolutely nothing. Then my phone rang. Mom, this time I answered. Silence. Then I heard her crying. Emma. Hi, Mom. She started crying harder. I'm so sorry. I closed my eyes. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, I didn't see it. I remained quiet. I didn't realize how much you were carrying. I looked out my window. Snow had started falling. I know, she cried softly. We missed you. I almost smiled. Because for years I had been present, but not really seen. Now I was gone, and suddenly everyone missed me. My mother took a shaky breath. I think I forgot something. What? Her voice broke. I forgot that you were my daughter before you were helpful. Tears filled my eyes. Because somehow those words hurt and healed me at the same time. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, Can you forgive me? I looked outside again. Snowflakes continued falling. Then I answered honestly. Not today, silence, but maybe someday. She cried again, and for once I didn't rush to make her feel better because her feelings belonged to her, not me. The following week, something unexpected happened. People started calling. Friends, neighbors, church members, even people I barely knew. Apparently, my Christmas post had traveled much farther than I realized. Everyone had heard the story. Everyone knew. And almost every conversation started the same way. I had no idea. Neither had I, not completely. Because when something becomes normal, you stop seeing it. I had spent years believing my sacrifices were simply part of being a good daughter. Now other people were looking at my life and seeing something entirely different. They saw exhaustion. They saw imbalance. They saw someone giving everything and receiving almost nothing in return. For years, I couldn't see that, but now I could. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. One afternoon, I received another phone call. This time it was Nora, my business partner. Sit down, I laughed. That sounds serious. It is, I sat. What's wrong? She laughed. Nothing's wrong. Something amazing happened. What? You know your Facebook post. Unfortunately, she laughed again. It went everywhere, I frowned. So, I could hear her smiling. We have 14 new catering bookings. I blinked. What? 14? I sat up. You're joking. Nope. Apparently, several women had shared my story, then their friends shared it. Then their churches, then community groups, and somehow people learned that I owned a catering company. By the end of January, we had more bookings than ever before. I laughed. Because life is strange. The Christmas dinner I didn't cook became the reason my business grew. Meanwhile, Ryan's life was becoming difficult. Melanie stopped calling. Then she officially ended their relationship. Several of his friends learned the truth. Apparently, none of them knew I paid household expenses. None of them knew I cooked every holiday. And suddenly, the funny story about his sister making dinner wasn't funny anymore. People started asking questions. Questions Ryan couldn't answer. Questions like, what exactly do you contribute? And for perhaps the first time in his life, he had no idea, because all his life, someone else had quietly carried him. Now nobody was carrying him anymore, and he hated it. 3 weeks after Christmas, there was a knock on my apartment door. I opened it. My father stood there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked older, much older. He held a small paper bag. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He entered slowly, looked around. My apartment was warm, books on the shelves, plants near the window. Cookbooks stacked beside the couch. My little world. He looked at everything carefully. Then he smiled softly. "You've made a nice home." I nodded. We sat down. Silence. Then he handed me the paper bag. I opened it. Inside was my grandmother's favorite wooden spoon. I looked up. He smiled sadly. "Your mother found it." I touched the smooth wood. Memories flooded back. Grandma teaching me pie crust, soup recipes, Christmas cookies. I almost cried. Dad cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology." I looked at him. He stared at his hands. "I got used to you taking care of everything." Silence. "I thought you didn't mind." Another pause. "I thought because you never complained, everything was fine." I listened quietly. Then he looked at me. "I was wrong." Tears filled his eyes. "I wasn't fair to you." Silence. "I expected too much." More silence. "And I gave too little." I looked at him. This man had never apologized to anyone. Not once. Yet here he was, 70 years old, trying. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said softly. "I just wanted you to know that I finally understand." I believed him because he looked heartbroken, not because Christmas failed, because he finally saw me and realized how badly he had missed it. I reached forward, placed my hand over his, and for the first time in years, we simply sat together, like father and daughter, not manager and helper, not provider and problem solver, just family. Spring arrived. My business kept growing. Nora and I rented our first commercial kitchen. Then we hired employees, then another employee. For the first time, my dream was becoming real. Around the same time, something beautiful happened. Women from church started talking, then sharing stories, then changing traditions. One woman stopped cooking alone. Another asked her husband to help. Another family ordered catering instead. One older woman hugged me after service. Then she whispered, "I think I've been tired for 30 years." I hugged her back, because I understood exactly what she meant. In June, I finally did something I had dreamed about for years. I published a small cookbook. I called it 187 Meals. The women who fed everyone inside were my grandmother's recipes, my mother's recipes, my recipes, and stories about love, family, exhaustion, boundaries, and learning to value yourself. The book sold far better than I expected. Letters arrived. Women shared their experiences. Some cried, some laughed. Many simply said, "Thank you." And every time I read those words, I thought of Grandma, because somehow, even after she was gone, she was still feeding people. Only now, she was feeding something different. Their courage. The following Christmas, I bought my first house. Small, white, big kitchen, large windows, a backyard with one beautiful tree. I hosted dinner, but this time everything was different. There were only 8 guests. Nora, Aunt Ruth, my parents, even Ryan, everyone brought something, everyone helped, everyone cleaned. At one point I looked around. My father was washing dishes. Ryan was drying plates. My mother was laughing. Aunt Ruth was setting dessert on the table. I smiled. Then I looked at the wooden spoon hanging beside my stove, and I thought about Grandma. 3 generations of women had stood in kitchens. But this time, nobody was carrying everything alone. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not perfection, just change. As dinner ended, my father raised his glass. Everyone looked at him. He smiled. "To Emma," I laughed. He continued, "for teaching all of us something important." Silence. Then he said, "Love should never become invisible." Nobody spoke, because every person at that table knew exactly what he meant. I looked around, then smiled, because I finally understood something too. I didn't destroy my family. I simply stopped carrying it. And when I put the weight down, everyone finally saw how heavy it had been. Sometimes revenge isn't screaming. Sometimes it isn't anger. Sometimes it isn't making someone suffer. Sometimes revenge is quietly choosing yourself, walking away, resting, healing. and allowing people to discover the value of your love only after it's no longer something they can take for granted. And honestly, that Christmas felt like the first real holiday of my entire life.